What's up everybody, this is your Chef Rob. Today I've got an epic video for you. It took me like 3 or 4 months to record this. You're gonna see me with a beard, you're gonna see me without a beard. The cider, as you can tell from the description of this video, is delicious and it's 0 sugar. So I cannot wait to show you the most simple way to make a high alcohol, 0 sugar, delicious tasting cider. That's what we're doing today. There's gonna be a lot of technique, but really at the end of the day, it's just a good quality cider and some yeast. Let's do this. We can get very, very complicated with this. Cider, it's technically a wine, so we can make it clear and we can really dial down the sparkling. We can even age it. We can add hops and we can oak it. I'm gonna show you just simple yeast into a bottle and making it sparkling. And what we're gonna get is we're gonna get a very dry cider with high alcohol, very low, if not no sugar, and we're gonna get some bubbles. Okay, so 2 major rules of making cider. 1, sanitize everything. I've got 2 types of sanitizer, and this is a chlorine-based sanitizer. I'll use either one of these. Lately, I've been using this one and having really good results with it. But sanitizing is rule number 1, because if you get some foreign yeast or bacteria, it's gonna turn this sour and not in a good way. Rule number 2, going to wanna keep notes, because let's say we bottled this up and we take 2 months to make this. We're not gonna remember exactly what our measurements were a month ago or 2 months ago. So every single batch that I make, whether it's good or whether it's bad, gets lots and lots of notes. First thing first, we're gonna need a cultivated yeast. So our goal is to turn all the sugar in this cider into alcohol, thus making it ketogenic. And that's gonna be called a dry cider. So we want this perfectly dry. The best yeast to use is gonna be champagne yeast. So pasteurized cider is gonna work fine. I like to get the stuff with the sediment on the bottom. And bonus points if you can find one in one of these. Now these are called a demijohn or a carboy. This is a 1 gallon carboy, so I have a total of 3 gallons and a 3 gallon demijohn or carboy right here. Now I'm gonna be doing the first fermentation. So we're gonna be doing 2 fermentations here. Okay, we're gonna be doing our first fermentation where the yeast turns the sugar into alcohol, and then we're gonna be doing a second fermentation where we make it bubbly. So let's get started on our first fermentation, and that's simply by just adding the cider into our sanitized demijohn here. Now we're gonna stop right here. We're not gonna fill all the way up to the top because we want a little bit of room, because when this yeast starts to activate, it's gonna create a bunch of foam, and we need that area for this to breathe without having that foam come out through our filter or our little bubbler right here. Remember, double check that all of this is sanitized. You don't wanna open this up and see you have some mold growing on the bottom of here. You're gonna have to throw away this whole thing, okay? So get the appropriate size stopper with a hole in the middle. We're gonna pop that guy into there, and we're gonna get ready to put it on here. Keep these, because what we're gonna do is after our first fermentation, we're gonna rack it, which means we're just gonna take the fermented wine or cider and we're gonna put it back into these bottles and we're gonna let them sit and settle out. So take these, clean them out, put them over to the side, and don't throw them away. Don't forget to keep the bottle caps too. Now at this point, it's time to cut open our yeast, and we're gonna dump our full yeast packet into here. Now this is enough yeast to make 5 gallons of cider, but I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna put the whole thing in there, and all that's gonna do is just make this start a little bit quicker. All right, now that we have the yeast inside of our fermentation container, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put the airlock on. Now airlocks, they come in a couple varieties. These are the 2 that I like. I usually go with this guy when I'm using the big 3 gallon carboy here. So we have our champagne yeast, our date, and the type of apple cider, and this was a Sonoma Coast apple. And we are gonna put our batch number at the top. So this is, now I'm going to do one more test, and for you guys, you aren't gonna need to do this. Feel free to do it though if you wanna go out and buy it, but we are gonna use a little cylinder of our cider in here to test the sugar content, because I want to be able to know what the alcohol level is at the end of this. So we need to do two things. We need to take a beginning measurement and an ending measurement. Now, like I said, if you're using champagne yeast, you can just trust that at the end there's going to be no sugar left. But I'm going to verify for you guys on camera here by using a hydrometer. This is a hydrometer, and this is going to tell me what the specific gravity of and the potential sugar and the potential alcohol by volume. So I'm going to go ahead and take that measurement real quick. Okay, so our original potential alcohol percentage is 6.5%. So 6.5% potential alcohol in here if all of the sugar gets fermented out. So now there's nothing to do but wait. We're just gonna go ahead and put this into a dark, safe location. I'm just gonna throw it underneath my counter here, and I'll show you what it looks like when the yeast starts bubbling. Check that out. So this is 24 hours after we added the yeast. You can see that it's completely taken over here. It's made all of these bubbles up here, and our bubbler, or our airlock, yep, it's bubbling away, telling me that there is CO2 being produced as the yeast is eating our sugar and turning it into alcohol and gas, the CO2. So we'll be done in about a week to 10 days. And how you know you're done is when this thing stops bubbling. That's when all of your champagne yeast has turned all the sugar into alcohol. Okay, so here we are 17 days later, and as you can see, it's completely stopped bubbling. So that tells me that all the sugar in here has been eaten by our yeast, and we've gotten what alcohol we can out of this. So after I saw that it stopped bubbling, I kind of let it go for another day or so, just made sure that the ferment wasn't stalled. And sometimes it'll stop like momentarily, then it'll start back up again. A lot of times if you have a fluctuation in like really cold to a really hot day or something like that. But that's not the case. This ferment is done. So now we're going to rack it. Okay, so what we got here is just a simple siphon, and I'm literally just using a piece of like 1/4-inch tubing. And the goal is in racking to take the main ferment here and then put it into new clean containers that don't have all the sediment at the bottom. And the sediment is just dead yeast and little particles falling out of solution here. All right, so we got everything racked. This is gonna get cleaned out and ready for a new batch. Now it's on to testing the alcohol content. We have a original potential alcohol of 6.5%. And then on here, we'll go ahead and say that is 0.2% potential alcohol by volume. So that means we have a alcohol percentage of 6.3%. And that's gonna lead to a super low carb cider. Okay, so we've successfully racked our cider and it's almost done. Right now, we're gonna put this away in a dark, cool spot. We've got caps on it, nice and tight. Everything's sanitized inside of here. It's just our fermented cider, and what we wanna do is kind of just let it sit and settle out. We're gonna do that for about a week. Okay, so it has been about 2 weeks and these ciders have been sitting. Right now you can kind of see that there is a gradation, and you can see it really good on the top one up there where it's starting to get clear up here and it's hazier down here. Pretty much if you let this sit for like 3 months, this thing would get clear on its own, and arguably it's the best way. You want to age your cider a little bit so all that haziness goes away, and that I think is the best way to do it. Some of the best cider sits in this stage right here, racked on a little bit of yeast for about a year, and 1-year-old cider tastes, I think, the best. Now you can see the sediment down here is starting to accumulate as it drops out from solution. Now, I like to do my cider a little bit hazy, and that's what we're going to be doing in this video. So we are going to actually start bottling this cider today, and I'm going to show you how to do it. We're going to add a little bit of sugar, we're going to add a little bit of yeast, and we're going to pop it in a bottle, put a top on it, call it good, and in a week after that, those bottles will be ready to drink. Here are our choices for bottles. We have a 750 milliliter champagne bottle. This is a 22 ounce bottle. This is actually what we're going to be using today. And this is a beer bottle. Now, which one would you choose? I recommend going with the beer bottles. That's because the bigger you go, the higher the pressure. So if you're just starting out and you don't know what ratios and you don't know how your cider is going to react, you don't want to create a bomb in your closet or in your fridge. So start small, because if one of these blow up, it's no big deal. If one of these blow up, you've got a problem. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick the 22 ounce only because I got a ton of these bottles donated to me from my neighbor who works at Boochcraft. And Boochcraft makes a hard kombucha and they ferment in bottles. So I know these bottles are tough. What I need to do right now is remove these labels, and I need to sanitize these bottles and sanitize everything I'm gonna be working with, including my sink, where I'm gonna dry my bottles, any tubes, the capper, all that stuff has to get sanitized. I'll be using a heat gun and a little bit WD-40 to get these labels off, and I'll be back with you when we are ready to start making our sugar syrup for the second fermentation. We've got some sugar here, and that is 4 tablespoons per gallon is the ratio that I like to use with champagne yeast to create the perfect amount of bubbles. Not too much that it blows up, but also not too little that it's just like still like drinking apple juice or something like that. So that's perfect. We're gonna use a little bit of leftover champagne yeast and pour that evenly, kind of split it up amongst these guys here. And we're gonna split this up here too. We're gonna try to do that very accurately by using just a little bit of a measuring cup here and a funnel. Remember, everything has to get sanitized. So let me go ahead and add our yeast and our sugar into this. And the amount of yeast that we're adding to this is kind of arbitrary, to be honest with you. You want to make sure that you got enough in there that it doesn't take weeks for this thing to kick off, but you don't want to add too much that you add a yeasty flavor to this. Gently mix the yeast and sugar together, but not to the point where you are stirring up the yeast that has settled out of solution here. Be very careful not to stir up what's on the bottom, just enough that you're sure that the sugar has gotten mixed up. Okay, it's time to start bottling. Now, I like using one of these crates because I will take all the bottles out. I'll set them here, flip this thing over, and I'll set these 1 gallon carboys on top of here, and I'll use the gravity from the higher carboy to fill up the bottle, kind of just like pulling a siphon. And I'm just using like simple, like I think this is like 1/4 inch or 3/8 tube, and then like this little bottling mechanism that when you push it down, it dispenses out cider, and when you let it up, it shuts the flow off and helps keep a siphon. All of this very cheap. I think it was like $6. Let's go ahead, get all these bottles out and get these things on top of this. And remember, we moved all of this very gently so we didn't disturb that bottom layer of yeast. We don't want that ending up in the bottle. Now I went ahead and I filled this thing up with water. And I did that so that I don't have to put my mouth on here and I can start a siphon really quickly. I'm gonna dump out what's in here and we'll be able to pull a siphon after that. You see we got a nice flow going. Now I wanna stop right about here. So right at the edge of the neck is where I'm filling these up to. These need to be cleaned and recycled. I'm gonna save the notes and I'm gonna put them in my notebook to make sure that I remember what everything is going on here, and I'm gonna throw some labels on these. But this is what 3 gallons of fermented cider gets us. So let's go ahead and start capping these off, because these things, the yeast is starting to react with the sugar and it is ready to get put in storage. So let's get after it. And these are oxygen barrier cap. Make sure you sanitize it before you put it on here. Just like that. It's good to go. So let's run through this. Let's go ahead and cap all these. Last one. Voila, just like that. Now it's gonna be about 2 weeks. I say the longer you leave it, the better these are gonna get. Now, just store them upright. You can keep them in your cupboard. Don't let them get too hot because it will cook the juice inside here, and you'll get like a cooked like apple pie kind of taste, but not in a good way. Go ahead, label all this, take diligent notes, put it into storage, let it sit for a year, pop it open, and you will be thanking me later. Guys, this video took a long time to make just because it takes forever to make cider, but it's well worth it. I wasn't able to find a decent cider video on the internet, which is why I made this. So I hope you like it, and if you do, and share this with someone you know that would love it. As always, guys, keep it keto, stay healthy. Peace.